And this is Dr. Bill Deagle of the NutriMedical Report radio show. I'm interviewing one of my best guests, Derek P. Gilbert. He's one of the hosts at Skywatch TV. He is a major author of the book, The Great Inception, basically the psyops by Satan from Eden to Armageddon. We're talking about some of these major research issues that deal with academia that goes back many centuries, so it's well academically supported. We're going to talk first about our NutriMeds because these help to fund all of the things. It's a health ministry, and I provide free consultations to people if they just call or email us, 888-212-8871. And if you can email me at
Skywatch TV. He is a major author of the book.
Our sound's coming through there, so I got to stop. Okay. Go ahead and talk.
Good.
I can't hear you now.
Can you hear me at all?
Uh-oh.
Are you hearing me coming through? Test, test, test. I've muted my phone so that I should just be coming through on the computer itself. I'm talking. Hello. Test.
Your sound is
test.
off. I can't hear you on the...
Let me...
Out of the remote. Okay. This is Dr. Bill Deagle of the NutriMedical Report. I'm interviewing Derek P. Gilbert, part 2 of his amazing expose, The Great Inception. The title of the book and the subtitle, Derek, go ahead with it. What is it called?
Satan's Psyops from Eden to Armageddon.
Now we're going to talk about, firstly, just a little intro. The supporting show is the NutriMedical Report show. I'm a functional medicine doc. I'm also a conservative Christian, and I bring on great experts like Derek P. Gilbert from Skywatch TV. He has many great people like Tom Horn and others that come with him. Mark Taylor's been on the show, Mary Colbert. We've had Dr. Michael Heiser on as well. So these are excellent authors that give us academic information that tells the truth about what's going on in our world. You can get help here if you contact me at nutrimedical@drbilldeagle.com. And of course, the key here is if you want to shop products, you can go A to Z. You can actually shop also for doctor consultations, for direct labs. If you want us to do a consultation, I can send lab kits to you. Other functional laboratories, Lumen Photon, etc. We have specials on usually over major holidays like Thanksgiving's coming up. We had one over the Columbia weekend holiday. We have medical grade nutraceuticals used with advanced functional medicine, which means we can optimize your health. I can do tests like pathway genomics, organic acid tests, metabolic tests, etc. So I can delve much deeper than your regular family doctor or internist to find out what's wrong with you and help you get well, whether you're fighting cancer or autoimmune disease. So do contact us. You can listen to the show from 2 to 5 Central, 3 to 6 Eastern, 12 to 3 Pacific Time, Monday to Friday. The archives are over at nutrimedical.com, to our media site, which is linked to a Deagle-network. That's DEAGLE-network, but the main website is NutriMedical, NUTRIMedical.com. And we're going to switch now and talk with Derek about his amazing book. And this is part 2 of our presentation, so let's go right to that. And we're going to go to the slideshow to kind of talk about this. For the current slide about the Tower of Babel was not at Babylon. So let's start with that slide in part 2. Derek, and go ahead with your discussion.
Well, this is something that I researched as part of the book, and I kind of stumbled into this some years ago in reading the works of Egyptologist David Roll, who makes a really good case that the Tower of Babel was not at Babylon. Nimrod gets a kind of a bad rap for Babylon, but he actually died many, many years before the kingdom of Babylon was ever founded. In fact, even before the city of Babylon was founded. Nimrod was the king of a city called Uruk, and the Bible is called Erech, E-R-E-C-H. We still call that land by that same name today. It's Iraq, just same name, just spelled differently. But he passed, Nimrod, probably before 3000 BC. There's a period of history scholars call the Uruk expansion, when this one little city in what is now southeastern Iraq controlled everything in the Fertile Crescent from the Persian Gulf to southern Turkey and all the way around to the Mediterranean coast. How they managed to accomplish this, we don't know, but it would make sense that the period when Uruk dominated the Fertile Crescent was when Nimrod, who the Bible tells us, expanded his kingdom into Assyria and built cities like Nineveh and Calneh. That was when Nimrod lived. Babylon was at least 1,000 years later.
I heard a quote in the book of Genesis explain why he managed to be. He was a very clever geopolitician. What he did is he would send his rabble into a town or city and cause a lot of mayhem and rape and murder. And then he'd say, look, if you'll make me emperor, I will make your city safe and put you under my protection. And all of a sudden they would become peaceful. So he would be the author of peace after he'd take his own army in to clean up the rabble, which he had sent in to cause mayhem. So it's very similar to the dialectic of opposition that we see even happening with our government and bad forces within it in other countries around the world like Russia, basically making mayhem and then coming in and bringing peace once they get domination.
Right. Create a problem and then offer the solution.
Right.
Very old formula. Anyway, Babylon, it's been known that it is a name that has been applied to other cities, including a city where scholars, archaeologists have found the largest and oldest ziggurat, which is a pyramid, a step pyramid, ever found in Mesopotamia. And this was at the ancient city of Eridu. If you want to skip to the next slide, we can look at that. Eridu, according to the Sumerians, was the very first city. It was founded, according to the timeline that scholars use, and we'll just use that to keep it simple, 5,400 BC or thereabouts.
Right.
This is where the culture called the Ubaid culture first emerged, almost fully formed. It's like one day there was a city with streets and organization and division of labor and a temple devoted to a god. And that is the key point here, because the temple was to the god called Enki. That's a compound word meaning Lord of the Earth.
Right.
Which is a very similar title if you're familiar with the New Testament, where Jesus referred to Satan as the god of this world.
Right. So what we're dealing with is we're dealing with very advanced beings. These cities appeared quickly because it was technology and civilization literally transplanted to these areas of the Middle East.
Right. The civilization emerged almost as though it came out of the Persian Gulf. And there's some theories that are really interesting. I didn't go into this in my book, but that civilization may have had to move out of what is now the Persian Gulf as water levels around the world rose. But that's a whole other story. The point is that this place was settled, became holy to this god called Enki, and his temple, if you want to skip to the next slide now, is called the Abzu. Was the source of the sweet waters that were necessary for life in southeast Iraq, because it's basically desert. You have to irrigate in order to grow crops. The Abzu, and this is the key point, the word Abzu is the Sumerian word from which we get the word abyss.
Right.
Now, this was the place that the god Enki lived. He lived below the temple in the abyss with beings that he called the Apkallu, and a scholar from Estonia by the name of Amar Anus studied the Apkallu and their characteristics and determined that this is just what the Mesopotamians called the Watchers, the angels who sinned, from Genesis chapter 6.
Now the problem, the word angel often confuses modern people, because the word angel from Greek just means messenger. It means a being from another place or realm. It didn't just mean a spirit being, it could be a physical being. So the word angel was often confused, because a lot of modern Christians we call spiritualize the presence of the Nephilim, or the fallen ones, or these watchers, as if they're just spirit beings and they didn't have physical flesh or couldn't hybridize themselves with humans, which is what the Bible basically says, including even in the book of Daniel, that they mingled themselves with the seed of men, which is actually genetic engineering. And this is one of the technologies that was brought to ancient mankind. In fact, it was the reason why Noah and his family were the only ones that were, quote, perfect in their generations. What it actually meant, if you actually translate it into modern genetics, it means they weren't genetically tampered with.
Right. And there are stories all over the world that deal with angels who came down and made into humans and produced races of demigods and oftentimes giants.
Right.
The Greeks, the Sumerians, Mesopotamians, and of course the Hebrews, which is mentioned in the Bible, even though since about the time of Augustine in the 5th century, we Christians have been trying to take that out of the Bible.
Well, that's why the book of
giants, they just being mighty men of renown, heroes of ancient times.
Right. They also didn't believe in the book of Enoch, since Constantine, as you mentioned before in your discussion, that they didn't tell us about that. Why did they remove the book of Enoch? Because it's like the pagans from Constantine on that pretended to be keepers of the church actually tried to remove the book of Enoch that explained these hybrid beings and as physical beings. And the actually insertion of scientific, metallurgical, pharmacological, and other science to human culture occurred in a giant leap because of this even we'll call transplantation from another realm, another type of beings.
Well, Augustine was a brilliant theologian. There's no question about that. But he came out of a sect called the Manichaeans, which worship angels, and I'm trying to read into too much of, but as near as I can tell, it seems that Augustine was concerned that the church was teaching Christians something that came too close to angel worship for his tastes.
Right.
And something that he couldn't really defend on scientific grounds. So he wanted to remove that from official church doctrine. And he pretty much succeeded, because we see even today a lot of mainstream Christians refuse to accept the idea. They point to the statement that Jesus made in the New Testament that angels in heaven will not marry, or neither marry nor give in marriage. The key words there are in heaven. The angels who sinned,
Right,
who are referenced in 2 Peter and Jude, weren't in heaven, where they began taking human lives and created these hybrid offspring.
right. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, do you want to go to the next slide?
Sure. The historical Nimrod, and again, this is based on the research of David Roll, and I think he's right, identifies the historical Nimrod as a king, a Sumerian king by the name of Enmerkar. Enmerkar is mentioned in the Sumerian king list. He was the second king of the city of Uruk after the flood. Like Nimrod, second generation after the flood. Roll says that the word En, the prefix to his name, is a title that means Lord, like En-Ki. Many of the other gods, like En-Lil, chief of their gods, also has that title. And he says that the word, or the suffix, Kar, Enmer-Kar, means hunter, which certainly would fit with the description of Nimrod in Genesis 10, verse 9, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord.
Right. Well, he was in the face of the Lord, which means he was in direct opposition to the will of the Creator God. So, in other words, it identifies him as a very advanced being, but an enemy of God.
Yes. And there's a poem, and this is the thing, there's a poem that's been preserved. It's from about the time of, maybe about 100 years before Abraham, around 2000 BC, a poem in Akkadian called Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta remembers a conflict between this Sumerian king, who I think is Nimrod, and a neighboring kingdom called Aratta. This Enmerkar, Nimrod, wanted to put the screws to these guys to get building materials so that he could build up, two things, two major building projects. One was to build a temple to Inanna, who was the goddess of sex and war, made his city, Uruk, the holy city of Inanna, Ishtar. And when we say, by the way, sex, we don't mean husband and wife, we mean carnal, gender fluid. Okay, this is a very old thing.
In fact, I think, don't they refer to Inanna as the goddess of war during the night, and then during the morning he becomes like a goddess or something? In other words, there's a fluidity in terms of maleness and females, very much like the representatives of Satan, or the horned god, being bisexual, basically being a hermaphrodite.
Right. Yes, there are hymns to Inanna, who is also known as Ishtar, Aphrodite, and Venus, Astarte or Ashtoreth in the Bible. There are hymns to Inanna in ancient Sumerian that where she says, or the words are put in her mouth, saying that although I am a woman when I sit in the tavern, I am also an exuberant young male. Another, the praises of being able to change men into women, women into men. Her followers included eunuchs and transvestites and male prostitutes. It was a problem. The worship of Inanna, Ishtar, Aphrodite, Astarte, Ashtoreth was a problem that was dealt with by the followers of Yahweh for more than 1,000 years. I mean, King Josiah, when he cleaned up the temple in the 7th century BC, literally had to destroy the houses of the male cult prostitutes to Ashtoreth, Inanna, Ishtar, that were inside the temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They had gotten, they had places where they were having ritual sex inside the temple.
Wow.
So, yeah. That was one of the things that Nimrod was doing. He built this big temple to Inanna in the city of Uruk. But the second one, and this is the one where God felt compelled to come down and stop, was to build up the Abzu, the house of the abyss, the temple to Enki at the city of Eridu.
Ah, that's why the term Abzu is there, the abyss.
Yes, in this poem, the Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta explains why he wanted to do it. He wanted to make it the abode of the gods.
Now,
he was trying to build an artificial holy mountain as the home of the gods directly above the abyss.
Now, people have to understand there's three heavens. first lowest heaven is the entropic world where time exists, and one of the other terms you can call Satan is King Kronos, or King of Time, because only in time can evil exist. The second is the second heaven, which is the place of the soul or the collective consciousness or spirits. And what he's saying is the abyss basically is the spiritual abyss where Satan or the power of darkness is in control of the abyss. Okay, so the spiritual realm, the second heaven, is the realm of Lucifer or Satan or the opposer of God. The third heaven is the eternal now, where to God, he's omniscient and omnipotent. There is, excuse my cough, there is no past or future. To God, everything is now. So, because of his omniscience, what you have to understand is that when you talk about the abyss, it's very similar to the current technology that they're talking about with the cell phone companies and the computer companies. They're saying within 5 to 7 years, it will succeed in not only hacking human consciousness, but making it open to young people to actually go into cyber warfare chambers, like the movie that came out a month ago called Jumanji, and cyber brothels, where you can literally go into cybernetic brothels in your mindscape, or the holodeck. I've called it from the Star Trek. I call it the holodeck. So it's very similar, because in other words, Satan tries to control consciousness. For example, when they talk about the possessions, like the demoniac of the Gadareans, basically the abyss, which is the realm of the mind and soul, is the realm where Satan actually invaded the minds of not only the leaders of Earth, including people like Hillary Clinton, who's a person of clay and iron, clay being human flesh and iron. So she's basically not purely human, she's basically being possessed. And a lot of our leaders on Earth are actually physically and spiritually and intellectually possessed by this abyss power. The power of Lucifer is the king of the abyss. That's what we're dealing with. And what Satan wants to do is create an omniscient, where he is the king of the cybernetic world, and most people will be trapped in this world and therefore can't ascend into the God's third heaven, which is the eternal realm of the Most High God. So this is very timely, that the exact same things that happened at the time of the early destruction that came on Earth are happening again right now, aren't they?
Yeah, it's
everything else is old. Everything old is new again. There's nothing new under the sun.
Let's go to the next slide and see what we have here.
Okay, and this is actually, I just cut the slide so we can move on to the one after this.
archaeology supports what I've been saying. Now, of course, we're speculating as to what exactly would have happened if God hadn't stepped in and stopped the construction of the Tower of Babel, which again is this ancient temple to Enki at the city of Eridu. We don't know, because God stopped it. But since God's personal intervention only happens a handful of times in the Bible, it was pretty serious.
Right.
But archaeologists have found during their digs at the city of Eridu 18 construction layers on this temple. This temple was maintained and kept up and expanded over thousands of years, literally thousands of years.
Right.
But, in fact, some of the levels, of the oldest levels, were below an 8-foot layer of silt from a massive flood. But the top level of construction was left unfinished.
That's exactly
now, why
likely.
would that be? Now, if we go to the next slide, you can see
exactly what happened to Babel/Eridu. Let us go down there and confuse their language so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. The Bible records exactly what happened. Nimrod wanted to build the Abzu, the abyss, into the abode of the gods.
Right.
That was the Tower of Babel, the Bab Elu in Akkadian, Gate of the Gods.
Right.
But Yahweh stepped in and stopped it.
Now the Strasbourg House for the European Parliament in Strasbourg, France, which is on the border with Germany, is an actual archetype of the incompleted Tower of Babel, isn't it?
Right.
Which means they wanted to build a modern Babylonish tower for this new superpower, which currently, with 27 nations, has 540 million people and the most advanced science on the planet. So it is also being Islamified, and even the Vatican has the Pentalpha division of the Cardinals have actually become Muslims to invite it. Just why the Pope is, the end of this month, going to end the so-called Protestant Reformation for 1/4 of all Catholics on earth, Christians on earth, and abolish the 500-year Protestant Reformation. So by this act, he's actually declaring that he is the prophet of a new age. And of course, if you discerning Christian, you know he's the false prophet. So these are all
the internet and the computer language, essentially machine language, which runs all of these computers that have connected us to the world, allowing us to connect this way, Bill. Which is a good use. We are in effect returning to one single language. So all of this, the Internet of Things, and this constant surveillance that we are volunteering for through devices like our smartphones is just taking us right back to Babel.
Well, that's why also, for example, we now have pretty good evidence, and I had Pastor Butch Pond plus other regular and classified sources. We now know that Mr. Paddock in the massacre in Mandalay Bay was an FBI officer running guns for ISIS. Now, ISIS is just a useful bunch of functionaries and idiots for the global New World Order. They're not really supporting Islam. They just want to have enough chaos, just like Nimrod. They can become the emperors of the planet. And the terror scanning technology that will happen in every now stadium or shopping center that will be brought in to make us feel safe, they can scan your body and your bones moving in a vehicle at 70 miles an hour along the freeway with a scanner 500 meters away. So it means that they will be able to actually know who you are, even in what seat in the car you are, or a drone over your house 300 meters above your house. They can actually tell if you're in the bedroom or the bathroom. So people don't understand what's coming, and that they're building literally a matrix where they know where you are to a cubic meter. There's tracker chips in everybody's cell phone. There's a smart grid where every appliance has now got a smart grid for the last 10 years. They haven't turned it on in North America, but they have in Europe. And so you off-peak power, you have to use your washer and dryer, say in Sweden, the last 5-6 years. You can't do your washing until after 11 o'clock at night where you're non-peak power. So people don't understand the matrix is being built just like the Tower of Babel, and they're literally telling us within 5 to 7 years, your kids will be able to order for Christmas the bottomless pit, which is actually the symbols for the Xbox. And this Christmas, if you have an MD Athlon 1800 or higher chip, the 32 chip, or the one coming next spring called the 64 chip, you'll be able to actually control your computer with your thoughts with a non-liquid nitrogen-cooled magnetronic helmet, or they call it a halo. You wear the halo and you can actually control your computer. This Christmas. Crazy, eh?
And it's getting even worse. I just saw a story today about the city of Los Angeles launching a pilot program to install what they're calling smart nodes on light poles. They're going to do it with 600 in the next year. It's a partnership with Philips Lighting and another company that basically will mount cameras, microphones, and internet-connected communications grid on these light poles, to connect them via the internet, but also to provide cell service. So this is how they'll sell it to the public. It'll improve cell coverage and internet connectivity in Los Angeles. It will also allow the city to monitor and listen to people on the street in real time wherever you are. And, of course, the city is going to be paid for this by the wireless carriers, $1,200 per smart node. So at 600 times $1,200 per year, that's a nice little chunk of change. But there are 110,000 light poles in Los Angeles. If they put smart nodes on all of them, that's like an additional $13 million in revenue for the city, but it means that you never go anywhere in Los Angeles where somebody somewhere can't watch you or listen to you and know exactly where you are. Because there are an awful lot of cities in America that are struggling for money. Think Chicago,
right?
Detroit, for a couple of others. This will be a great way for them to raise money, and hey, it'll make it so easy you'll never get a bad signal wherever you are in our town. But anytime you do anything, somebody will see it.
Well, the thing is called the Virtual World Project, and the central node is at Schriever Air Force Base. And I give this story because people find it hard to believe, but it's true. On October 10th, 1993, I was taken supernaturally to the city from which the mark of the beast would come. And 9 months to the day after I got above top secret clearance, I walked on July 10th, 1994, through the underground quantum matrix of the supercomputer for the Virtual World Project, 2 miles underground. So I can tell you I don't know some of it. I know everything about the technical and spiritual issues of it. And people don't understand this latest massacre is designed to actually bring us to the point where we're entering the full level of the matrix. And they want to be able to not only have smart dust inside of buildings and to be able to talk to your cell phone, but they want to be able to pick up your biometrics. And the most accurate way to pick up your biometrics at a distance is to have terahertz scanners even on the light poles, so they can actually pick up your bone signature even when you don't get a good facial picture or digital fingerprints or iris scan. They can pick up your print of your bones, and so all these devices, like the metal detectors, the ultimate one is the terahertz scanner. The terahertz scanner uses a frequency that's a sideband of microwaves. So what they're going to do is use these to try to monitor the population, and they create a basically a sim of you in cyberspace, so they have a total tracking of every conversation, everything you buy and sell, all the communications you do with anybody, and they want total control of your cash, so it's in their supercomputer, not in your pocket. They'll eventually going to declare all forms of currency illegal except cyber currency in their supercomputers.
Mm-hmm.
It's
connecting it all in turning us back into a one world government. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and it's not going to last long, but it's going to be extremely painful and result in the death of much of humanity. Okay, next slide here we have is.
Well, the consequence of what happened at Babel was a return to what God basically saying to mankind, that if you don't want to deal with me, you'll deal with my subordinates. This is Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 and 9, but verse 8 is the key verse here. In the English Standard Version, which is a translation I like because they get this particular verse right, and this verse is key to understanding what goes on in the Old Testament. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, meaning when he confused the language at the Tower of Babel,
right,
he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God.
Right.
Now, the ESV follows these copies of the Septuagint and the text of the Book of Deuteronomy found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in rendering the verse sons of God rather than sons of Israel, which is the way most English translations have this verse.
Right.
The point is, after Babel, what God did was say, look, I'm going to appoint these small g gods, these angels, to serve as my intermediaries, because you don't want to deal with me. Now, of course, God knew what was going to happen. And by the way, we know that there are 70. When we look at the next slide here, you see the table of nations from Genesis chapter 10. 70 nations are named, and it's not a coincidence that the Canaanites, the neighbors of Israel, believed that their chief god, named El, lived on Mount Hermon with 70 sons.
Right.
We see that number 70 pop up a couple of other places in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, where it's rather significant.
It also pops up in the Book of Mormon. Pops up in the Book of Mormon because the Mormons have the Council of 70.
Ah, okay. It's drawing on the same idea.
Yeah, exactly.
On Mount Sinai, after the Israelites leave Egypt, I believe this is in Exodus 21. God has Moses and Aaron and the 70 elders of Egypt come up Mount Sinai, where the elders of Israel have a meal on Mount Sinai with God. And the Bible says they beheld God, ate and drank, and God did not lay his hand on the elders of Israel. But then later in the New Testament, when Jesus visits Caesarea Philippi, he takes Peter and James and John with him up Mount Hermon. It says takes him up a very high mountain. The only high mountain near Caesarea Philippi was Mount Hermon. And he is transfigured. And this was like sending a supernatural flare into the spirit realm to just let them know, hey, I'm here. What are you going to do about it? And when he comes down the mountain at the beginning of Luke chapter 10, we're told that Jesus sends out 70 disciples ahead of him into Galilee. Again, it's that number, and it's significant. It's not a coincidence. Of course, these 70 B'nai Elohim, or sons of God, decided to rebel against his authority. They set themselves up as gods in their own right. They judged wickedly, and the result was Psalm 82, the slide you see here. This is the most clear depiction of the divine council in action in the Bible.
Right.
God takes his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? And then skipping down, I said you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die and fall like any prince. God, Yahweh, has decreed the death of these small g gods.
Right, in other words...
Molech, Chemosh, Asherah, Dagon, Baal. They're going to die someday.
Right, in other words, even though they're supernatural, they are temporal, and they have an end. And so is Satan. That's why he's so angry, because although he's the highest intelligent created being, he has a termination day.
Exactly. So, again, as we go through, we're sort of tracking through a survey of the holy mountains or cosmic mountains in biblical history and why they were important, why they are important. Mountain number 4, of course, mountain number 3 was the artificial mountain Babel. Mountain number 4, Sinai, of course, this is where Moses hears the call. We skip down to the next slide here. God, again, confirming that when we're talking about these small g gods, we're not talking about imaginary entities. We're talking about literal beings. Exodus 12:12 makes it very clear. God tells Moses, on this night, on all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgments. Then in Exodus 14, next slide, God says to Moses, and this is what got me started on the research that led to the book, as the Israelites are getting out of Egypt. Okay, they're escaping. God is delivering them from the hand of Pharaoh. And then the Lord said to Moses, tell the people of Israel to turn back. He tells them to turn around and encamp in front of Pi-hahiroth. Forgive my pronunciation, I know that's horrible. In front of Baal Zephon. You shall encamp facing it by the sea. Well, that raises some questions. I'm not a historian, credentialed historian, but I know enough history to know that Baal was not an Egyptian god. He was a Canaanite god.
Right.
So what was Baal? What was he doing in Egypt? Why did God tell him to turn back and camp at this place sacred to Baal on the shore of the Red Sea? Okay, next slide. Baal arrived in Egypt in 1750 BC or thereabouts with a group of people, Semitic people called the Hyksos. That's a transliteration of the Egyptian phrase meaning rulers of foreign lands. He was identified by these Canaanites with the Egyptian god of chaos, Set. They lived in the Nile Delta, which is the region that the Israelites settled when Jacob and the Israelites came there looking for food during a famine. We don't know whether the Hyksos were still around at the time of the Exodus. They may have been kicked out by the Egyptians about 100 years earlier, but the worship of Baal continued. Even down to the time of Ramses the Great, about 200 years after the Exodus, he was still being worshipped. We can skip down to one more slide here. Today we think of Set, after Baal here, we get another slide showing you the way Set is usually portrayed in Egyptian art. Next slide. Set is usually portrayed as the evil god who cut up his brother Osiris, the good god, into 14 pieces. But during the time that the Israelites were in Egypt, Set was still considered a hero. He rode on the front of the solar boat of Ra, and every night he defended Ra and the sun against the evil snake of chaos, the chaos serpent Apophis, or Apep. It wasn't until about 1,000 years after the Exodus that Set became a villain,
right?
Because he was also the god of foreigners, and in the first millennium BC, starting at about 700 BC, Egypt was overrun by the Nubians, and then the Assyrians, and then the Persians, and then nearly by the Babylonians, and so the god of foreigners wasn't considered a hero anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting the name Apophis. Interesting the name Apophis actually is the name of the asteroid heading toward us in 12 years and a few months.
Yes, exactly.
It's basically called it's named after this dragon destroyer of the sun, or Ra. And it's apparently this asteroid is 3 times the size of the one that, according to scientists, refer that they think destroyed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. And it has a roughly 1% or less than 1% chance of it or its debris field striking Earth with a asteroid field, if you want to call it, millions of miles across. So it's interesting. There's these timelines occurring right now, and you see physical timelines, geopolitical timelines, and everything converging in the near future. Technologically, with artificial intelligence, robotics, genetics, everything converging in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting too that this Apophis is coming back about 3,600 years after he first Apophis slash. There was a Hyksos king named Apophis about 3,600 years ago, and the whole Nibiru conspiracy theory postulates a 3,600-year orbit. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Ramses the Great, you remember him depicted in the movie by Yul Brynner. Of course, he was not the god of the Exodus. He was not the pharaoh of the Exodus, rather. Right. He was about 200 years later, but we can go to the next slide. He set up a stela commemorating the 400th anniversary of this god, Baal / Set, arriving in Egypt. So again, the worship of this god, Baal,
was very important in northern Egypt for hundreds of years. And that's the key point, because Baal was considered by the Canaanites the god who defeated the chaos god, represented by the sea, the ocean, a god called Yam, who was assisted by this evil, twisted serpent, Lotan, which is how the Canaanites said Leviathan. But that's the key point. Baal, on the shore of the Red Sea, at a site named for his holy mountain, Mount Zaphon, and he was supposed to be the god who mastered the sea. And of course, what happens on the next slide? God parts the sea. Okay, Baal worshippers, watch this. Yahweh parts the sea. The Israelites get to the other side, and then the Baal worshippers chase them into down to the seafloor, figuring, okay, this is just a trap that Baal has set for the Israelites. Oh wait, they're getting to the other side. We better chase them. And of course, then the sea closes.
So, the symbology was there even before this happened with Moses by thousands of years.
Yes,
wow.
Yes.
That's amazing.
This was a key message that Yahweh was sending. He was not just delivering Israel from the hand of Pharaoh. He was delivering Israel from the hand of Baal. And sending a clear message to Baal and the Baal worshippers in Canaan, which is the land that God had chosen for his people, saying, my people are now free, and we are coming for you next.
Now, one of the things about Baal worship is tied directly to pedogate and to the high levels of demonism that's in America, because all of them involved, they're very rabid about abortion. For example, if you could offer women the idea of putting a valve in to stop pregnancy, that would be humane and reasonable, would even stop STDs. But the pro-abortionist side, for example, they just have a case now before the courts where I think it's the ACLU are suing the government to provide, I think it's here in California, but it's federal that they're filing, rights to a federally funded abortion for a non-American, Central American girl who's a teenager, arrived here in pregnancy, and they're trying to say it's her right for us to pay for a publicly funded abortion. Remember, this is a satanic ceremony. So abortion isn't just, quote, considered a woman's right. It's not only reducing human fertility of the home population in America and Europe the same way, but it also is a satanic ceremony to Baal. And there's 8 holy days for the Baal's sacrifice, and usually they're within 9 months after a special day where they have lascivious sex. So the Day of the Dead, which is the Halloween, is actually 9 months after a spring festival where they have lascivious sex with other than their normal husband or wife. And then if they don't have a child, they literally create sweetbreads to the Queen of Heaven. They cook in their little ovens and bring these proxies that look like gingerbread babies and bring them on the arms of Baal or Baal, this giant god with the big brass or arms and hot coals, and they literally burn either a physical baby or the proxy, which are these sweetbreads to the Queen of Heaven that look like gingerbread cookies of babies, girls and boys. That's what they did. And people don't understand the same thing has infiltrated our politics and our things like I call Hollywood, with Mr. Weinstein and others like the leader of Amazon, who's involved with Amazon Media. The same thing's going on, isn't it?
Yeah, it's horrific. But the children are clearly looked at nothing more than something to corrupt, because corrupting the most innocent, they believe, gives them some sort of supernatural power.
I think
this goes back to Crowley and before.
I think of it as ectoplasmic spiritual coin of the devil. How's that?
I think that's a good way of putting it.
Coin of the devil. Okay, I don't know how much further we'll be able to get. We got about another 10 minutes, and then we're going to have to get ready for the live show, which we're going to do on the NutriMedical Report on Genesis Network. But I think we have about 10 minutes left. We started about 6 minutes past the hour, so let's keep rocking and rolling.
We can finish up. If we can finish up maybe 3-4 more slides, we'll take us up to the next mountain. We'll finish up on Mount Sinai here. God declared that Mount Sinai was holy. This was the mountain of God. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. And this, the next slide is what I referred to earlier, the 70, where God in Exodus 24, it was Exodus 21 I said before, that was incorrect. Exodus 24, where God tells Moses to bring Aaron's sons, the high priest, and the 70 elders of Israel up to the mountain. And again, this is remarkable, because I'd always been taught that we could never look directly on God because we could not absorb or handle his majesty, his glory. And yet, on this particular case, God made an exception. Exodus 24, beginning at verse 9, then Moses and Arab and Nadab and Abihu and 70 of the elders of Israel, again, a reversal of those 70 divine beings, these B'nai Elohim that God placed over the nations.
Right.
70 of the elders of Israel went up and they saw the God of Israel. And he did not lay his hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. They beheld God and ate and drank. This is the first time since Eden that humans had been back on God's holy mountain. And again, this is the message from God to the divine council, the God to these rebellious 70 sons of God,
Right.
that this was how things are going to go. Humans are going to come back into the family, and you are going to die.
Right. What he's basically, what God is saying there is what he did in Eden, is he's fusing the eternal, which is God, with the temporal, which are God's children that have now serving, hearing, and doing his will, or they call it to Shema, hear and do. So what he's saying is his eventual, and that's why the eternal gospel that's preached by Jesus was coming back for a bride. It means us, the saved ones, are the bride, and collectively are going to become fused with his spirit and go from being temporal beings to eternal beings. So he will fuse eternity with temporality, and down through the ages, as we become a galactic civilization, will be godly beings spreading across the universe. That's what God's intention was, to create a bride that would bring him children that would come to the knowledge of the Most High God, and would, even if they physically died, they wouldn't suffer the second death, because they would be his children, and they would go into an eternal kingdom immediately. Whether it's 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 years, they would become eternal ones, because their soul and God's spirit had fused, so they were now eternal beings, not temporal beings. Which is what Satan was so angry to destroy God's children, right?
Right. Because, and of course, God also told us, as the Apostle Paul wrote to the church at Corinth, there's a day coming when we will judge the angels. So I'm pretty sure that that didn't sit well with Satan and his cohorts.
Right. What he's basically saying is, I will elevate my bride, which is a collective of countless humans that will then go from being temporal beings to becoming my eternal bride that will be then deified. So the deification is the eternal gospel. And it doesn't mean all man. It means a great portion of mankind may not make it to this, and they will be temporal beings just like Satan and die. And literally, people think that God is cruel, he would torture forever. No. The end point of mankind in Satan is annihilation. Now, it might take forever to annihilate them, but the end point isn't to have a party like with Flip Bolson and Sammy Davis Jr. in hell, having cocktails in hell. It is annihilation.
Yeah.
We can stop here and pick up the next point with the holy mountain of Baal, and I identify who Baal actually is, Mount Zaphon. We can talk about that when we pick it up next time.
Amazing discussion today. I'll have it posted up on YouTube and so on, and we'll be on there in about another 10 minutes. So take care, and we'll be talking again in a few minutes. Amazing discussion, Derek P. Gilbert. You're an amazing academic and spiritually wise. And again, my people perish for lack of wisdom, and you bring wisdom, so the Spirit and the gospel of the Most High God, the eternal gospels, it is the time of the end, isn't it? The end of the secular age of Lucifer is here, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Amen.
God bless.
God bless you. Talk again soon.
Take care.